Lesi, Turawi, Aloha no Wa.
Yawaskano. I'm thankful you are well. My name is John Oates Bowen, and I would like to welcome all of you to today's discussion on behalf of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation, NiU NOW, the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples, and the United Religions Initiative. This webinar will explore the sacred wisdom and practices of Indigenous peoples, specifically the Kanaka Maoli, the Hopi, and the Haudenosaunee. My name is John Oates Bowen. I am a member of the Beaver Clan of the Seneca Nation, a faith keeper of the Cold Spring Longhouse, and the director of Seneca Language Teacher Support and Community Outreach. I am honored to moderate today's discussion about Indigenous peoples' sacred wisdom and practices, which encompass a wealth of knowledge and skills developed over millennia, focusing on a deep reciprocal relationship with the environment. This includes sustainable natural resource management, such as controlled seasonal fires to reduce wildfire risk and promote forest health, and agroforestry, which integrates trees into farming to improve soil health and biodiversity. It also includes social structures built on principles of cooperation, sufficiency, and respect for all life. Many Indigenous beliefs relate to the importance of nature and our responsibility as human beings to act as environmental stewards. It is widely acknowledged that Indigenous peoples, despite making up just 5% of the global population, protect a significant amount of the planet's remaining biodiversity. Traditional ecological knowledge serves as an alternative to the more objective and resource-oriented Western worldview of the environment as something to be exploited. Many long-established Indigenous values root themselves in a respect for the natural world and the belief that humans are simply part of a circle in which all life has equal value. Indigenous concepts of health often emphasize living in harmony with the world and each other. Holistic health in Hopi culture centers on having a good heart, which is essential for maintaining harmony and the well-being of the community and the world. Similarly, Haudenosaunee people speak of having a good mind to achieve peace and well-being. The Haudenosaunee concept of the good mind is an ethical and spiritual principle of conscious, positive intent, emphasizing love for one another. It involves setting aside individual needs for the collective good, mindfully considering the impact of decisions, and fostering a state of peacefulness. The good mind is crucial for well-being. Despite the positive environmental and health benefits of putting Indigenous knowledge into practice, there are challenges to keeping them alive and protecting them. The mainstream cultures that surround Indigenous peoples often contradict their long-established values, centering on the interconnectedness of all life. For instance, globalization, which centers itself on neoliberal economic policy, often prioritizes market-based values, such as individual ownership and profit, which can undermine some Indigenous practices centering on respecting all living things and acting as stewards of the earth. Additionally, climate change, environmental degradation, and appropriation of knowledge by corporations are significant threats that undermine the sustainability of traditional practices and the communities that rely on them. The aim of this webinar is to raise awareness of the Indigenous people's sacred wisdom and practices, and to discuss the challenges to putting Indigenous wisdom into practice. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists for today. We have Dr. Manulani Aluli Meyer, who is the Associate Specialist at Student Affairs at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. We also have with us today Sahmie Wytewa, who is the owner of NRG1 Consulting. So before Dr. Manulani Meyer takes the floor, I would like to remind everyone that we do have a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen for you to use at any point in this webinar. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box found at the bottom of the screen. I would also like to remind you again that we are here today to help raise awareness of the Indigenous people's sacred wisdom and practices. Dr. Meyer, you have the floor for 15 minutes.
Alana kahi amoy lana mali a oya iyo. He iyo kumu he iyo lau. He iyo lono a ke alo. E ho o ulu mai, e ho o ulu mai. E ho o ulu ai ka velina a ke aloha. A ke aka mai, a ke aka mai. Ake aka mai. E ho o pono mai, e ho o pono mai. Ke pono, he pono, ke pono. He pono. Aloha mai kako e ku'umauhoa. Hello, beloveds. Such a pleasure to be here. Sahmie, it's such a pleasure to share some time with you and Channel. Mahalo nui. Thank you for this chance to link in to what has never been broken, and that is our love of land and our service to people. I think that's about sums it up. So next, you know, Indigenous people think Indigenous doesn't include themselves because they're not, they forget where they're from. But those of us who are still happen to be here against all odds, we're still here in Hawaii against all odds. So our Indigenous wisdom is how to remain in place and still love, how to be in relationship with others and deepen that affection, even through the challenges of modernity, extraction, competition, greed, capitalism. I mean, these are all external realities, but the truth of who we are gets maintained through the practices we hold dear. And some of those practices are completely changed because of modernity. And so the contemporary world of Indigenous people look like me. You know what I mean? My twin sister looks like my mother, and I look like my father. And so the ongoing mutual contradiction of our time is to understand what Indigenous really means, so that you and everyone on this in the planet can feel included. And for me, as an Indigenous epistemologist, as somebody that's dedicated her life to answering a question of what it means to be intelligent, the sport saved my life. I'm not the smart person in the class. I'm the one that cleans up when someone throws up. They say, "Money." I'm the throw up cleaner in my school, in my grade school. And I loved it because they were so shame, but I loved cleaning up. It wasn't a problem for me. So it's kind of like modernity. This is my job, to be of service to the cleaning up of our minds and the shoring up of our hearts, so that we can see that Indigenous is simply a synonym for continuity. So who wants to continue? Raise your hands. Who wants to be on the planet for a little longer than 10 more years or 40 more years? So continuity does have some systems, and those systems are shaped, driven, and they actually, the source of that continuity is aloha. The source of our continuity is loving. So you know, after all this fancy dancing with epistemology, hermeneutics, empiricism, all that, all those words, I have found the simplicity is organized around purpose. And our purpose, if we are to remain on this planet, is to learn how to love. And so we're bringing out our Ho'oponopono practices. We have practices that deal with fractured families. As a Haku Ho'oponopono for the last 30, 40 years, what I've learned by this practice is that truth-telling is the first beginning. If we can't speak truthfully, we're in essence lying. And I discovered that 26 years ago when I was 40 years old. My sister died and I realized how much of a liar I was. And, you know, it's very humbling. It's very humbling to realize that we have been socialized, especially as women. You know, how are you today? Oh, fine, you know, and you're not. You're not. How much is this shirt? Oh, I don't know, $8. No, it was, you know, $28. It was kind of expensive. So we just lie all the time. So living the good life for me, for our people, is the practice of ho'opono. Ho'opono is that truth-telling that therefore aligns with a type of coherence throughout the world that creates a different reality. I'm learning because of this difference between AI and consciousness. I'm learning right now that the difference is our capacity to choose, and that's consciousness. So the free will that AI is helping us understand ourselves is that what are we choosing in the world? Are we choosing continuity? Or are we choosing greed, extraction? What are we choosing? And in Hawaii, these ideas are called Ike Kupuna, the seeing, the knowing, and the embodiment given by our transspatial realities beyond us. See, we do not have a problem with things beyond us. Oh my gosh. They're to be respected. They're to be understood at the level that we can understand them as human beings, as bipeds on the planet. And I'm humbled always with the distinction of things that I can't possibly understand through my mind. So in that trilogy of the physical, mental, and spiritual, we say here in Hawaii, mana'o'io, knowing, mana'olana, knowledge, and aloha, which is understanding. What is the most valuable thing in life? It is aloha. And this is, you know, I love that I have 15 minutes. I try to say it in 5, but it really is. It's about that song. The song that you heard, Kaleo Hano, is a famous, beloved song of a beautiful place in Mokuokeawe, the Hawaii Island, called Keokaha. That was one of the early Hawaiian homestead sites that my grandfather helped develop in 1919. So to play that song was a ho'ailona. It was a portend, and it put me in the space of just wanting to not give you an intellectual discussion of sacred wisdom, but to give you my heart on the matter. In the most potent time of thousands of years, you know, there's 6, 7, what do you call it, comets in the skies. There's so much energy. Our Kilauea volcano is going off. The energy of the world is asking us to awaken. It's asking us to link in with others and to mutually emerge. And this is what I've learned. Our word for Hawaiian epistemology, Hawaiian philosophy of knowledge, is mo'ike aloha. And mo'ike aloha simply means mo'o is like a lizard, but it's a synonym for continuity. Mo'oike, mo'ike. Ike is to see, ike is to know. It's a word for intelligence, mo'ike. Mo'ike means our intelligence has a genesis. And our genesis in Hawaii, mo'ike aloha. It's aloha. No mean to brag, but you know, come on. It's really that simple and yet that complex. So what we're saying in the Pacific is, as we experience mutual contradictions everywhere, And it's almost in everything. And the mutual contradiction for me right now in higher education is the idea that it's so masculine. We have to defend our thesis, argue our point. if you can't understand what I'm saying because of my silence, you don't understand what I'm trying to say. So and it's the fact that there were all women in here, the fact there's just so much to the rise of the feminine. And we see it too, the rise of the feminine. It's in our moon cycles. It's in our relationality to Mahina, our moon, and it's in our relationality to ourselves. So people always say, the most important thing is relationships. I'm like, oh, please, that's like a given. The most important thing is the quality of those relationships. It's the quality. And those things are often, they're tangible, but people always want to evaluate it. evaluate it. It's gotten us crazy. We're addicted to the temporal and to the empirical worlds. And in that addiction, we miss the actual depth, scope, and purpose of the infinite. And the infinite for me is how we treat each other, living that good life, living in the pono field of goodness and truth. So for us, it's like aloha, compassion, profound compassion, pono, truth and wisdom. Aloha, pono. You got to have both. And both to me are synonyms for spirit. Wherever love is, spirit is. And spirit is whatever you think it is that fills your heart and that commits yourself to a choice that connects you to others. And we have words for those. This the mo'ike, the mo'ike also means dream interpretation. So the mo'ike, I did have a moe uhane last night, and the moe uhane was one of my students was frustrated because he couldn't get a ride from, he had like a 3-hour bus ride. And I said, why didn't you ask people in the class? They go right by this place. I mean, in this dream. But he never thought of asking people. Like, what? So let's start asking people. And better yet, let's start letting people know that we're available for this kind of help. And so that dream was just last night. So I was like, why am I having this dream? Because when someone recognizes the energy and the knowledge of what we get from our dreams, that's sacred wisdom. I don't have to make it up. It's gifted to us every day, almost every night, if we respect it. So last night I woke up, it was like, that was a funny dream. Maoris have they say whakatoki, but we say olelo no ea. It's heaha te mea o te teone, e heaha te mea o te heaha te mea. What is the most important thing in the world? O teone. What is the most important thing in the world? He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is people, it is people, it is people. And here I'm thinking, what? Isn't it love? Isn't it love? Isn't it love? Like, no, it's people. And then we get to practice. We get to practice. And when we practice best? When it's hard, when it's difficult. That's when aloha aku, aloha mai, kokua aku, kokua mai, a'o aku, a'o mai. It means as you sow, so shall you reap. It's not like a reciprocal thing. It is simultaneous. It happens at that moment. The gift is in the giving. Aloha aku, aloha mai. It means love is about loving. It's not about why am I not loved? No, how can I love better? So that sense of simultaneity is a gift to us. And I want to close this session, this 15-minute sprint through my dreams last night by saying I really appreciate an opportunity to gather to discuss ancestral wisdom. Now, every single person on this webinar, you have it. And let's explore it in our dreams. Let's explore it in our choices. Let's explore it through our words and what we don't say. So maloko ne movahone, feel my gratitude to be in this call. And I look forward to learning from you, Sahmie. Aloha mai.
Yahweh, Dr. Meyer, for those beautiful words. To know that love is the source of continuity is amazing, and that it's all about the people, the people, the people. And then we can practice our loving as opposed to waiting to receive it. Those are powerful messages. You know, sometimes we're so used to giving and expecting something in return, or just expecting something to come to us. But love is love. It shouldn't be conditional. So that was a very good reminder. That was a very good reminder. I appreciate that. Well, at this time, we're going to give Ms. Wytewa a chance to tell us some Hopi wisdom, and you have the floor for 15 minutes. I do want to remind, I'm so sorry, I do want to remind the attendees that if you do have a question, put it in the Q&A box, but also if you could, please tell us who the question is for. Who would you like to have answer it? That will help us facilitate that part of the webinar better.
Hi, everybody. It's still morning here on Hopi. I am on the Hopi Reservation in Masangnavi. Nesami Wytewa yan Matiwa, Nepik Yasyam, Ne Masangnefangam. Always forget that I'm not in Kumeyaay territory anymore, and I have, I guess, rehearsed that introduction to include that I was living in San Diego County, Kumeyaay territory, but I'm home. I thank you guys for the invitation, and I think I saw Lee Von Ham and his daughter online as well, so I want to thank their connection to this space for giving the opportunity. I was born and raised here on Hopi, and I think listening to Dr. Manulani, I wasn't quite sure what I needed to talk about today. And hearing her start out with emotion is very important, because sometimes we come into these spaces and we think we have to be prepared and we have to be polished. Something that we say or do or want to impart has to have tremendous impact. And I decided not to do that today. So I didn't script anything, and I'm just grateful that the opening was from the heart, and that's how it should be. I think just listening to Dr. Manulani as well, around knowing where she comes from and her people and the challenges that they faced recently with fires, and then, you know, currently with a lot of, oh gosh, I don't even want to speak politics, but land and life and water, every living thing. I feel grateful to be present here to hear that from you directly. And then song, I think something that connects us, all of us that come with and from culture and sometimes from faith, is about the ways in which we introduce ourselves to the world by speaking, by singing, just by hearing things, the wind blowing, leaves and water. It's very beautiful to be able to connect to those things, and I wouldn't have that I guess knowing if I wasn't raised here in community. One of the bigger items that I guess wanted to impart today was about suffering. And because spirituality is a colonial, a lot of what we're saying right now is colonial context, right? We created words that put our feelings, our thoughts, our the ways that we think about and come to share, we put it in a box of a word that is Western vocabulary, and it doesn't always come with the stronger intention of language. When I think about the suffering that our elders have had over years, and it can be the simple suffering from having things fall apart in life, to not having crops turn out, and then very, very huge losses that are incomprehensible when you put it in language. It's not fair to try to um, I guess, paint the picture of pain and suffering for one person to the next. And so with all of that knowledge in their older years, And mine, I'll say that I'm much older than I look. But when we get to these places, it's not until then that we come to these understandings of the teachings and the ways that we maybe didn't always know was the lesson or the learning, or that we're continuing to learn. In Western education, we say we're lifelong learners, but what does that really mean in the context of culture and identity? Um, Suffering, I think, for myself from an early age, um, not growing up with two parents is suffering. You learn different ways of living and being, apart from family or apart from piece of your heart, people that created you. And you move into different ways of knowing, to live with a single parent, to maybe not be totally aware of the hardships until much later, to know that my mother did struggle, but she overcame, and she worked really hard to do what she could for me. And then the rest of it is choice. Dr. Manulani referenced, the spirituality of choice, that we get to do these things every day. We get to use our voice, our song, our connection to the land and resources, in order to do the most good for not just ourselves, our community, but beyond. And I think from the Hopi space, I would say that most of you that are academics or have had an interest in Hopi have read something along the way that speaks to our practice of starting each day with good intentions, with a pure heart, clear mind, in order to do the best good for the world, including the things that we don't see. When we initiate what we call prayer, whether that's just a talking to, something out there that we don't see, or an asking for, um, a submission to, that is all spirituality. There's not a right way to do it. There's just the practice and the choice to connect yourself to what's bigger than you. Back to the space of suffering, I feel like we don't talk about those things. We do take a lot as women, as I not only was raised by a single parent, but I was a single parent. And we learn as Native or Indigenous women, whether you come from a matrilineal society or you have your own ways of presenting, describing matriarchs in your community, we take on a lot and we don't talk about it. I feel like our history shows that women did come together, men did come together, communities came together in spaces and times that needed them. And today we're so consumed with every affliction, every distraction, that it does lessen the opportunity for us to come together in those ways. And so suffering then becomes a one person duty, right? We take that on by ourselves, whether our family wants us to share it or not, or a friend wants to help you bear the burden or help you talk through it. Or we have other resources, like counseling or therapy or groups. We tend to just lean into ourselves and just push forward, because that's I would say, the art of suffering as women. And so the coming back to spirituality and really looking at the ways that we did approach suffering in the past, not just for ourselves, but our communities. What does that look like? What does it feel like? And how do we lean into them? Um, Everything in life, I guess, that I've learned has been about a lesson. And when you learn more about different cultures and the ways that they come to these offerings of knowledge or context and experience, something that I guess I've learned to carry with me is that if I'm receiving hardship, there's a lesson that I'm not learning. There's something in the way that it's being presented, or that I am avoiding the lesson in itself. And so stepping back, reflecting, taking time. Sometimes that is an individual job. But when you have the opportunity to have a system of support, that looks different for everyone. It could be one person, it could be a stranger. That system of support can help you get through those things. I did want to share about, not in its entirety, I think my time away from home this last 3 years has taught me that not everything has to be shared. Um, and I recognize also that I am not from every community that has had the most impact or direct impact of colonialism, because it started from the shores, and those communities, unfortunately, are impacted in the Western context of enrollment of tribal lands, of treaties, and um, you know, the terrible state of blood quantum. And so I'm fortunate to come from a community that maybe looks like it doesn't have much, but we're very rich with culture and identity and ceremony. And so I feel like coming back to how we even get here as Hopi is you you're received and you're prepared for before you're even born in different ways that create a really strong network of support. Um, I didn't always understand the message from our adult males in the family, our guas, our grandpas, our tahas, our uncles, or even the females in our family who say, they were very direct when we were young. You marry a Hopi, you, this was like, it felt hard or harsh in the tone and the context that it was being told to us. And when we're young and we leave for college or we get a job in the city and you think, oh, there's a lot more out here and it looks different than home. There's libraries and movies and you start to learn a lot more. Maybe you're introduced to it by movies or books. This sense of love that isn't the cultural space of love. And we then adopt these colonial senses of love that don't translate back to your community. And so when you're born, one of the strongest values that I see when I got to be a grandmother, I had these ceremonies when I was with my own children, and I still respected them and I appreciated them. But it wasn't until I was a mother and then lately a grandmother. I have 6 grandchildren, 4 girls and 2 boys. And it wasn't until I got to go through that same process and ceremony, unfortunately during COVID, which got very synthesized to just a few of us, um, that I realized we create this fabric of support that could be construed as love for our children by clanships, by two parents coming together and them coming with their own families and clan networks, and then all of these little ways of caring for each other that actually are the big things. Had I known that, or I guess coming to that realization when we think about how our people lived long ago, and parents, maybe for different reasons, were not always a two-parent household. That could be famine, it could be health, it could be something random, right? Or choice. However, because you're established from your time of your birth with two really strong networks, not just of blood family, but then clan relatives, constantly, no matter where you go in community, people will recognize you as a child by your clanships, by your mother and your father, by your grandparents, by your community. And that constant love is everywhere you go. It's not tied to one person when we get to adulthood and we think now in the Western colonial context, I need to seek love and acknowledgement from one person. And if I don't have that, I'm not fulfilled or I'm not whole. Um, I do feel like that's in part the suffering that people go through when we're disconnected from community and we are trying to find our way, whether that's through a job or education. However we find ourselves outside of community, that piece of suffering can potentially be resolved if we just come back to community and we, I guess, take the time to intentionally connect to and process what that network of support looks like from a cultural lens, and then embrace it. It's not for everyone, and also there's a lot of gaps that we need to fill in reclaiming some of those things, but it's here for us. I'll leave it at that and look forward to hearing from the people that are here online with us and also learning more from Dr. Manulani and her responses as well. Esqueli.
Yahweh is Wytewa. That was very profound. Your reminder that suffering helps us continue to learn. And everything in life is about a lesson. That is really hard to take sometimes. And I need that reminder every now and then, even in our teachings, to get a good mind, you have to have these challenges to develop yourself. But yeah, suffering is painful, but it definitely does. If you allow it, if you make that choice, it helps us continue to learn, to be better people, to show more love, to be more connected to community. So I appreciate that reminder very much. At this point in the webinar, we would like to open it up to the question and answer session. As of right now, we have 2 questions in our question box. Feel free to add a few more, but the ones in here are pretty deep. So I would like to give each of our panel members a chance to address the question. And we will start with this one. What are your views on Palestine as an Indigenous person? What actions do you believe people should be taking regarding the Palestinian crisis? And we'll start with you, Dr. Meyer. Lucky.
it really coincides with what Sahmie is saying about suffering. We suffer until we learn what the lessons are. I can't possibly interject my ideas on another group of people. All I feel is there's suffering. And so there's suffering in the world until we understand its purpose. And so there's so much to this debate that my ignorance is palpable because I've never been there. I don't know these people. And so as a Kanaka thinker in island settings, all I know is we suffer because we are not aware of the true nature of the world. And therefore we choose exclusion, we choose hatred, we choose anger. So those choices, I can't speak specifically about that specific hakaka, we call it, but as a Ho'oponopono practitioner, I see suffering all the time. They only ask us to enter into a situation when auntie and uncle want to kill each other. But at one time, did they ever love each other? Did they ever love each other? That's the question, because you can't return to something you never had. So we don't, as Haku Ho'oponopono, we don't go into mediation between, neighbors that just moved in and hate each other, because that's called mediation. That's not Ho'oponopono. In an indigenous way for us in Hawaii, when we are healing, it's because we were once in love. So suffering remains a sustained choice. And I love that the word for love that's just one word. But we've got songs about our respect and admiration for the touch of the Multicultural breeze on a cool, hot summer day. So I don't mean to deflect on that question. It's the epistemology that assumes I should respond to something I have no business in responding to. As an Indigenous person, my thinking is not what's it called, franchisable. So I'm humbled by my ignorance around the strength, beauty, and the complexity of this issue. All I understand is the process of unlinking myself and my family and my community from suffering. Thank you.
Askwale, Dr. Manulani, for sharing that. I think in the Hopi context, we do actually have clans that are, how would you say, they're not encouraged to engage in politics, both in our community and then in the ways that our culture works. And so I think everyone's different. And so when you ask the question about, how do we think about it, how do we feel about it, and what do we think should happen? There's a whole line of young folks in our world who have very strong opinions about how much we should all be doing, how furious they are at what we aren't doing, or how we're not using our voice and our privilege. And then there are those that are activating, organizing, and I think we all do this in different ways both in our history as a culture, and then also in our current context of being mixed up in a lot of different worlds. I think television, social media, radio, there's a whole host of influence that is offered to us, and even that is a privilege. When you look at, when you read, and when you maybe make a connection to the ways that their conflict is depriving them of general liberties that we take for granted. I live in a home that doesn't have running water, so I have to haul my water. It requires me to go see my grandmother, and I don't want to use the word requires, but that's where I go pick up water, or another family where I haul water from, or from the windmill where I haul water. And it presents different spaces, environments for me to see what's happening in those areas, all because I have a need. And so I was fortunate this past 3 years to be in Kumeyaay territory on the campus of the University of San Diego, of which, when I first stepped foot on their campus, already had conflict because of the faith behind the foundation of that campus. And I guess my frame of mind for approaching the opportunity was from a position description, and I went, oh, that sounds interesting. And then I get there and I realize that my whole being is broken open because I understand my history and Pueblo history, Pueblo people's history, not just Arizona and New Mexico. And then when you expand it and you learn more about the history of the Kumeyaay's, Kumeyaay territory, Kumeyaay ancestral lands, and coastal peoples of what is now called California, it opens you up to a lot more suffering if you choose to. I was fortunate to meet people on the campus who are deeply connected, rooted to the conflicts in the areas that we call Palestine and Gaza. And for them to go home and visit during conflict, and then return trip to come back to privilege of not being in conflict. The University of San Diego has some beautiful, beautiful people doing community work. And oftentimes, when you look at things in the world, in a world of privilege, we highlight people making big moves that get noticed by for a monetary value, for a capitalist value. And we are not as attuned to the people on the ground using and elevating community-based frameworks of whether that's research or analysis, data. And so one of the really beautiful things that happened as soon as October spun us on our heels was that there was these members of faculty and students on our campus that went right into this mode of what do we do and how do we do it. And for 2 years and continuing, it's grown. But the first year and a half, there was programming to go back to the history of this conflict that is not new. We're just seeing it. We're seeing it on our screens, both television and our phones and computers. But over 100 years of this conflict, and maybe more that we don't really understand, as Dr. Manulani shared, there's the unseen. And so at some point, did they love each other? And then where did this conflict come from? And we don't know all those things. But for a year and a half, and then into 2 years, this group organized educational opportunities of both context and content and speakers, authors, community members from those areas to give us at least twice a month, if not once a month, um, the insight. And then beyond that, once I think there was a true grounding of that history into the current context, then it became, solutions based and organizing based. Like, what are people actually doing? What have they been doing? What are the resources available? And how do we give to that? In the first meeting that I attended for a forum, it was a lot of academics speaking from um, the Western colonial vocabulary of education to say, what it is they learned. And they were not from the area, and they were also non-Indigenous. Not saying that they aren't valuable academics in that space, but our students were on the walls and on the floors asking, what do we do? How do we do? And the academics who were presenting said, well, I don't have an answer for you, but maybe you can go to other people on campus and ask. And in the moment of everything happening all at once, that was not what students wanted to hear. And the best that I could offer from a space of community, and it was devastating. I didn't know very much at all about what was happening over there, but it was still devastating to feel it. I related it and asked the audience to think about that this conflict is not new to America, as we call it. First peoples of what we call America have endured this history, these conflicts for so many years that don't feel like years, they feel infinite. And for those of us that maybe feel a little bit more, people can read books and can read history and connect to it and not really have emotional reactions to it. But those of us, I'm very emotional, and I'm really happy to share this space with Dr. Manulani, because we get to cry and not feel bad about it. And I encourage people to do that. But you get to look at these things and educate and say, you know what's going to happen? Why don't you look at the history of Native Americans in America and see what happened in health and education and government and politics, in all the ways that conflict created federal policy to continue erasure and is alive today, what that looks like. What are we going to see in health issues, in trauma needs and response? Just look at Indian history and let's prepare for that, because when we eventually get to a place of right now we're still all in emergency mode, and I feel like when we get to a true place of healing and restoration, all those things are already researched for Native and Indigenous communities worldwide. Start there. And for our students that are in higher education or our journalists, keep writing about it, because we're going to come back to these things and read about it and learn from them. That's a really long answer. I'll stop there.
We're just going to change. That is a very deep topic, and we could do a whole webinar just on that. But we do want to get back to a few more questions. We only have 2 minutes left. So either one of you, or Dr. Meyer, we'll give you a chance to answer this one. a gentleman had asked, what are your views on the COP30 in Brazil this year? And how can this process be improved to mitigate climate change and secure the future? But perhaps you could just, from your lens in general, talk about how we as human beings could use our indigenous knowledge to create a more hopeful future climate-wise on this planet.
You know, as a philosopher, by the way, Sahmie, that was just brilliant and clear and coherent. So mahalo nui for that answer. You know, for me, for us, climate change, specificity leads to universality, not the other way around. Indigeneity is about what is specific to place and how we kukulu we say, how we pool our energy. So even for such large global issues, everybody runs over there. They run over there. But if you stay in your place and you take care of your kupuna and your neighbor, if you rejuvenate the soil around your community, you clean up your streams, that is the best possible focus for climate change. And the adaptation for climate change, oh my gosh, all we're doing is growing coconuts. That's all I'm into, is growing coconuts and feeding our people. But I do want to also end by saying our spiritual evolution is imminent because of the conflicts we are now in. Imminent. Because if we don't understand the lessons that Sahmie is saying are inherent in what is opposite, is what is polemic, is what is contrasting. I love using different words, including our own languaging. Then we're just going to keep blaming. You know what I mean? So we alomaka Hawai so that we can understand our own process in this energetic field. It's a field. And so the choices that we make, and see, so language is a metaphor. Language is just a metaphor for our thinking, for our feeling, for our stances on an idea. I can't be drawn into what do I think about a world way over there. You know what I mean? I can barely understand what's happening around my block. So, for someone who doesn't have, I have water catchment, Sahmie, but I don't have to take in my water. So that's impressive. That is impressive. That is the priority of a life, even to flush the toilet. So I value that understanding of where your water comes from. And so extrapolate that in the world, and you'll get more, you'll get an awareness. See, awareness is a synonym for spirituality. Awareness is a synonym. And so it's yes, it's about love, but it's about that spiritual energetic field of awareness, intuition, respect, goodness, all those things. That is an energetic field that helps us choose and develop ourselves and our families and those around us. So it's kind of simple for me. It's really all about the spiritual embodiment of the world. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thankful to have such beautiful words spoken today, even about such deep subjects. And thinking about all the deep things we've talked about today, including the important role of conflict and suffering to help us learn to truly love one another. I do want to give each of our panel members a chance to have 3 minutes for closing remarks. So we will start with Ms. Wytewa right now. You have about 3 minutes to give your closing remarks.
Everything just went out my head. I guess we were invited to speak about spirituality and Indigenous, that sense of it. I think everything's a choice. And if you are disconnected from your communities, you have a choice to recommit, to learn. We don't always grow up in the families that maybe have the knowledge, but you have layers within your community where you can receive that if you're willing. And that's how I came home 15 years ago. And then when I left 3 years ago and I'm coming back, it's the same, you reconnect and you figure out where a place to start. I think spirituality as well is patience with yourself. You don't have to know everything. There are lessons to be learned and ways that you come to them, whether that's becoming a mother, a daughter, a sister, a grandmother, a granddaughter, niece, auntie, and even a friend. And so I want to encourage everyone that's on here today. I know you're maybe looking for some really strong words from the both of us, but I think leading with compassion always, knowing that we don't have all the answers, but there are people out there to come that you can come to. And Dr. Manulani, you were just now saying something about, gosh, I had a moment where I was thinking of how to kind of tie that to this closing. Um, but let me just stop there and I'll hand it over to you. I feel like there's so much more to learn from each other than trying to just get it all out at once.
Sahmie, I have to say, a woman that carries her water into the home to take care of her family, that right there is a priority of awareness, of structuralizing your day, and then you get to see different things because of where you need to go. That's just what you said, and I want to close with extending that idea that suffering is a real idea. Suffering is pain is inevitable, suffering is not. So that I heard that somewhere in some movie, and I thought, oh my gosh. um and so I get that, and so that's kind of what brought me to the Buddha, because all of life is suffering, and I'm like, what, really? And then I'm like, yeah, it's only if you choose it. So I want to tell Toko you for saying that choice, because right now we're actually thinking AI is smarter than humans. No, AI is faster, and can do, mathematical pattern, recognition billions of times faster than us, but we comprehend it. We are the ones that choose the capacity. So our evolution is imminent. And I think it's because we're suffering, and we're going to evolve, because spiritual evolution accelerates with the engagement of contrast, with the engagement of conflict. Paulo Freire came into my class and said something like, conflict is the midwife of consciousness. So let's get conscious, not despite these sufferings, but because of them. They turn into affirmations. They turn into affirmations for our own evolution if we become more aware. And when we center that awareness around the love of land and the service to people, everything will change. Everything will change. So in closing, for Hawaii, for the place that everyone thinks is paradise, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Thank you so much. But we are doing our best here to understand ourselves and to be of service to a worldwide awakening that we know is imminent because of the nature of what aloha teaches us. So aloha mai, aloha aku. Mahalo nui. Thank you, Sahmie and Jano. Mahalo nui for this opportunity to learn from you, all of you, and to share with our 90 plus participants in here to head into winter with awareness and gratitude, and that's what the Makiki season is for us. Maloko nei mawahone, feel our gratitude. Mahalo. Yeah. Nice.
At this time, I would like to thank all of our beautiful panelists, all two of you. It was amazing to hear such deep, uplifting words. I wish we could have gotten to all the questions, but we have come to the end of our lovely webinar. So at this time, I would thank the International Academy of Multicultural Cooperation for offering tech support for today's webinar. I would also like to thank the co-hosts, NiU NOW, the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples, and the United Religions Initiative. I would also like to express my deepest gratitude to our panelists, who have assisted us in developing a much deeper understanding of Indigenous peoples' sacred wisdom and practices. Lastly, I would like to thank our attendees who have made a conscious effort, a choice to hear more about about Indigenous knowledge systems. So that is all that we have for today. And I hope all of you will have a beautiful, happy day and take some time to be out in nature so that we can learn a little bit more through the trees and the birds and all those beautiful things. That is all.